Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to this week's episode of The Niche Cast. We are from The Niche Case, the niche-case.com, home of major Aotearoa sporting yarns. Another funky podcast here for you today. We're talking lots of cricket. We got breakers, are super fun right now, and we got football. National League final on the men's side or the women's side?
Yep, on the men's side.
On the
Women's
men's
is two further weeks.
And we've got the return of the Wellington Phoenix men from their World Cup campaign, where they were super successful themselves, and Wellington Phoenix women battle on. Just the warm-up kōrero here, Wildcard. I've got a question, again, related to the World Cup, but with a bit of a Kiwi twist. Which international player would you want to put into the All Whites team for the next World Cup cycle? Given we've got one slot, we've got a couple of goodie bags to entice this player over to Aotearoa. Obviously, we're building to the next World Cup, so we don't want anyone 40 years of age right now, because then they'll be 44, maybe 45 by the time of the next World Cup. Although we are open to rest and rotation during the World Cup cycle and qualification, so we do manage workloads quite well. Which international player would you like to inject into this All Whites team for the next World Cup cycle?
Well, I had a quick think about this, and I thought, basically what we're talking about is a player probably under the age of 25 or something. It was someone who's going to be hitting their peak in 2026. Also got to look at the balance of the All White squad and think, where do they need the help? I did wonder about maybe a centre-back to replace Winston Reid. I couldn't really think of a centre-back in that age range that immediately popped off the top. So I thought, you know what, we can probably do all right. We'll just change into a team that can win games 4-3. I thought, well, Erling Haaland's the best player of that age. And Norway didn't even make the World Cup this time, so he's got nothing to lose. Having said that, I'm not dropping Chris Wood. He's the captain of the team. So either Haaland's got to play a role off the bench, or he's got to be the second striker, or I could pick Charles Barkley's favorite player, Kylian Mbappe, as he called him, out on the wing, dragging the defense's attention away from Chris Wood in the middle, giving him room to work, and then swinging in a few crosses and getting them finishing off those things in the box. So I think I'm going to go with Kylian Mbappe for that one. I reckon he would be the fellow who could move the needle the most for the All Whites. Don't know how international transfers work. I believe we would need to, nothing's impossible with FIFA. You just need a big enough bag of cash. And luckily for Mbappe, he plays for PSG, so he can probably resource that money for us and get that deal done.
I was going to say, you're throwing up these rules and regulations about international transfers, which is not only is it a made-up situation, we are dealing with FIFA, so there are no rules and regulations to abide by. It wasn't
that long ago that the All Whites did actually just play a whole bunch of ineligible players. That actually happened one time. They missed out on the Olympics a couple of years ago because of that. So there's form there as well.
All Whites involved in FIFA corruption. What about the? I do like the Spanish duo, like the little buggers in the midfield.
Old Gavi and
Pedri
and Gavi.
Yeah, I think one of those blokes to work with Sapri, get a bit of Joe Bell action in there as well. Tiki-taka with a bit of Joe Bell mungle. I like that. Welcome to the Niche Cast. Every week we do a Patreon podcast for our Patreon whānau. That is there on the Patreon feed, and Patreon is the best way to support us straight up the guts, which is really where Kylian Mbappe usually likes to go. But a Kiwi run it straight flavor for Mbappe. Patreon.com/Our Niche Case is the best way to support us directly. And we do like to whip up the Patreon podcast once a week, early in the week as well, based off ideas, questions, and queries from the Patreon whānau. Tomorrow's a Friday, which means we'll be sending out our newsletter via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. Lots of Aotearoa sporting content will be jam-packed in that, and a little bit of music. Do like to share a bit of music in the newsletters as well, and of course, theniche-case.com. Plenty of sporting yarns to be found there. Wildcard. Let's get underway with a bit of mindfulness.
Bit of mindfulness from a main man, Ram Das, who went. I think this is almost like a little thought experiment. He says, "Ask yourself, where am I?" Answer: here. Ask yourself, what time is it? The answer: now. Here and now.
That seems like a little tool for your tool belt. A little surfboard in your quiver.
Definitely.
A little paintbrush in your paint. What's I don't know
I
that
was going
word.
to say easel, but that's not the same thing. Yeah, I don't know what you keep paintbrushes in.
What about the
Do you keep
paint?
surfboards and quivers as well? Is that the term for?
Yeah, you got your quiver. You got your
Okay.
quiver of surfboards on the wall. I
I
assume
was
you got a
picturing
quiver.
like a surfboard and a thing with a bunch of like bow and arrow type
I don't know,
situations.
but it's a
But
good one to have
you
at your
probably call that
disposal.
a
You can
sheath,
just
a sword in a sheath.
when you're feeling a bit stressed out or unmindful, you can tap in. Where am I? Here. What time is it now?
Yeah, and that's Ram Dass's most famous quote is, "Be here now." Is his whole abiding mantra is remember those things. Just remind yourself. Like, it's not even about what to do with that information. That comes later. It's just remember that because that's your grounding principle, basically.
Where are the breakers?
Yeah, top of the table.
First. When are the breakers playing? Tonight. Thursday night. And they have another game on Saturday. Thursday night, they are facing Southeast Melbourne, who are fourth. And the Saturday game is against the Perth Wildcats. They are seventh. Breakers have a record of 10-3. They are the only team with more than 9 wins. And they are one of two teams with 3 losses. Sydney Kings are second. They have played 2 fewer games, so that's where the extra wins come from for the Breakers. Breakers are 4-2 at home, 6-1 away, which is fantabulous. I do have noted wildcard the home advantage of the Breakers, whether it's over on the North Shore of Auckland or at the Spark Arena in the city. And I
Or in
also,
Christchurch for this game.
they are in Christchurch for this game, so that will be another raucous home crowd. And I do enjoy the reason I like the Wellington Phoenix women and I want them to do well is because it's really fun when the whole when just Wellington Phoenix football, it's the yellow of it all. It's the yellow seats. It's just the Wellington Phoenix are having fun. Obviously, football crowds in Aotearoa and around the world, you get a bit of a sing along, you get some antics. It's just a fun environment. I want the women's team to be a part of that. But that led me to pondering just the home advantage and the home connection with the fans and the whole environment for the Wellington Phoenix men's and women's. Obviously, we're seeing it with the Breakers, like being at home as much as you would in any old season prior to the pandemic. I think it helps. Like they are 6-1 away from home, but I think connection to the community, Turanga Waiwai, knowing that you do have a home stadium that can rally you as well, I think that helps you perform away. So when New Zealand Warriors fans are listening, like you should be tapped in with the Breakers, you should be tapped in with the Wellington Phoenix because they both look vibrant places to play basketball, to play football. There seems to be a bit of buzz around those teams. So next season, New Zealand Warriors returning to Mount Smart, I think there's a bit of a bump available to the Warriors. Obviously, it's a lot easier to enjoy that bump with the Breakers as opposed to the Wellington Phoenix, as we'll discuss later on the show. But Breakers are fun. The crowds are ruckus. I think the ruckus crowds help their defensive identity wildcard because everyone's engaged. Who's your favorite Breakers player right now?
Favorite Breakers player is probably Azalea, I think maybe. It's high performing local fella who will be actually, he's playing against his old team, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, in this upcoming one, so it'll be funky. Derek Pardon might be the best to watch though, because all the things he was just saying there about the like defensive identity, plus he can score and do all those things, but he's just locked in every play, like whichever end they're at, he's just always locked in, playing at a high level. And I mean, they feed off the crowd, but the crowd also feeds off that at the same time. And I think one thing we're starting to get these, the Breakers did a lot of damage over the pandemic. It wasn't just because they're away from home. It's because they were such a badly run organization, losing so many games and looking like everyone was just miserable the whole time. They've fixed that this year. And I think there's not just because there is the initial bump of having home games again and people who just have been waiting a while to see professional basketball and Aotearoa, and now they get a chance to do that. And there's now momentum. They've got the bump at the start, and they've kept it going by playing well in a way that gets the fans engaged. Because every play matters when you're a grinded out defensive team. And the one time that wasn't the case in the home game was last week, where they absolutely blew out. It was Brisbane, in which case it's just super fun because you're watching your team score every possession. Like, that's awesome. That's the Warriors are going to get that bump. The Phoenix have had that bump as well. And the Phoenix women's team had that bump because it was the first game of the thing and the crowd wasn't so good the next time. And I suspect if they don't get results, I'm not sure people will get down to those games as often as they should. But I think there will be a solid core of, I don't know, around 1,000 people that turn up every game to that. Just as there's always a solid 5 or 6K that go to Phoenix men's games. But if the Phoenix men start winning as well, get momentum from that bump, you're going to see that sitting around the 10K mark. The Warriors are absolutely going to get that bump from the return. What they do with that is the next step, because they're going to get a big crowd for their first couple of things. They had big crowds when they were able to get the occasional home games last season. Now that that's a regular thing, it'll be big to start the season. What those crowds do and what the atmosphere is like from then probably depends on what the team gets up to, and we don't know how that will go yet. But I'll tell you what, this isn't Warriors chat, but slight divergence. I fairly impressed with old mate, their new coach there. I think he's saying a lot of the right things. Of course, saying the right things and doing the right things is very different. And any Breakers fan over the last 4 years will tell you that, because they've seen that in stark focus. And here this season, we're actually seeing what it looks like where you say and do the right things. That's cool. But yeah, one to watch out for the Warriors, because we have seen there's a few lessons from the Kiwi teams and Aussie comps there that sometimes don't always apply to all of them, even though they're available to all of them.
Breakers Basketball 101 is basically a lot of defensive effort and good shooting. Like, they have Jarrell Brantley's a big dude who can shoot. Like, obviously, you're going to get Derek Pardon. He's going to be down low. He's going to be grinding with anyone who wants to smoke. But you can also put Rob Lowen, who's a tall center who can shoot from outside. Then you've got Abercrombie, Vodanovic, Liafa, Glidden, McDowell White. They can all score the basketball themselves, whether it's three-pointers, whether it's Jarrell Brantley's Mr. Floating Central, so he can do that. But all those dudes are also quite tall. They're quite long. Ryan Rupert's been out injured, so they lost that. And we were talking about that a few weeks ago. He started to start a few games. He began to start a few games. And that was because he's a tall, lengthy effort. No, he's got good effort on defense and he did the job. He's been out injured, which is a bit of a hole in the lineup, but they've been able to maintain a decent level of play. So I think if we're stretching out this Warriors comparison, even a bit of the Phoenix, like there's a Phoenix thing where when they're on, they're really fun. Because you got Ben Wayne, you got Kryev, a bit of funk, bit of razzle dazzle. Clayton Lewis is doing all of his magic. Then you got the low-key figures like Ugarkovic and Sam Sutton playing left back. Like, he's bombing forward, but he's also bombing back. So you got this combination of entertainment, maybe not the defensive grit and mana that you quite want just yet, but you do have
Yeah,
figures who
not
can
yet, but
provide
yeah.
that class, and you can see the seeds of the identity. The Warriors, they will have to do something that engages the fans and the community as far as building the identity goes, because it's all good to. I think every Warriors fan just wants a solid defensive team, and that's low hanging fruit for you to engage the fans. Is when they can see, oh, this is a team that tries really hard on defense, and they execute the defensive schemes that their coach wants. That's cool. Like, as a fan, you can enjoy that, because we've all seen Warriors teams that love a bit of razzle dazzle, but with all due respect to Blackcaps softness, it's never quite touched Warriors softness as far as the soft underbelly defensive grit goes. Swing back to the Breakers, what have they done? Everyone knows they're probably the best defensive team in the NBL. And that, for Kiwis, that is a fantastic fulcrum, shout out Stephen Adams, of to build upon and build around when you're trying to build that identity. So I think the Breakers have the players to build that defensive identity. As we've mentioned, the imports are leading that culture, leading that buy-in with the scheme. And when that's your foundation, and a lot of the players on the team can also score points, like, that's just good basketball.
Yeah, I think an important thing you said there is that the imports set that foundation and lead that scheme, because it's one thing to have that from your local players. You sort of expect that to an extent from your local players, to get that also from the players you scout and recruit from overseas to be your best players. And they are the best players for the Breakers. They're three imports, leading the way defensively, offensively, which is what you want. That's you sign for them from overseas to be your best players, and they are the best players. But they've not just signed them to do, like, sometimes I think differently in recent times as well, it's been the case of like, oh, we'll just, if we have this core, we can just sign whoever and we'll get the flashiest, most exciting players and then chuck them on top, and then they don't do it. Like, it just doesn't work. They don't have the I don't know, the buy-in or whatever. They're not leaders of that sort of tone in the same way that we're seeing this season, where they are. Like, Derek Pardon in particular absolutely like sets the table for everyone else. He dines at it too himself, but he sets the table too. He like leads by example. And if you were like, I mean, this is very much like in our wheelhouse of topics to talk about, but if you're going to describe what Kiwi basketball is like at its peak and at its most representative, like, what are the qualities you would like what are the qualities you would have that you would like put on that list?
Stephen Adams.
I was almost framing that question of like, if Stephen Adams is the representative of Kiwi basketball, like, what are the it pretty much is, though, isn't it? Like, he's kind of the best version of a Kiwi player, and is also in the NBA doing amazing things. It's like, well, what does he do? He plays hard. He doesn't cut corners. Like, he's zoned in every play. He does what the coach asks to, like, no ego, no, I got to get mine before anyone else sort of thing. Selfless in that way. Tough, like physically tough. Like, you can't push him around. People talk about him being the strongest man in the NBA, like all these kind of things. And then the fundamentals of just like good hands, rebound, maybe not the most skillful shooter, but finishes, like, knows his areas and finishes well within those areas. Not the free throw line, obviously, not one of his areas, but those are kind of qualities that all apply to the Breakers at the moment as well. I haven't checked their rebounding stats. I don't think they're above and beyond, because they're not actually that tall of a team. There are definitely teams they come up against who have more size than them. But that's not the point. The point is that they box out. The point is that they muscle up. They do those kind of things. And Modi Mail said before the season, when he got promoted to be the head coach of the Breakers, he said, basically, I want to get this team back to having a Kiwi identity. I want to like restore those kind of things and how this team plays, so fans can see a team that represents them, not just a random basketball team. And I wrote at the time, like, when that happened, I'm like, this is a breath of fresh air, because this has been one of the not the only one, but one of the major problems with the Breakers over the last few years. As new owners came in and kind of wanted to turn them into an NBA export team. Like, let's get that NBA atmosphere on game day. Let's get like flashy names signed as imports. Let's get players who are going to make the NBA someday with all these Knicks stars and all this like. It felt a lot like, not to mention like the Barstool connection and things like that. Like a lot of it felt like playing to an overseas audience rather than playing to the Kiwi audience. And Coach Modi has flipped that. And I have to give him an immense amount of credit for that, not only for saying it, but for doing it. And then on top of doing it, being really successful at it. Although I think that's maybe the least surprising of it, is if you get these kind of identities. And, you know, Steven Adams has been asked who his favorite basketballer was growing up a few times. And he tends not to answer that too specifically because I don't think he's a guy who actually watched a whole lot of basketball growing up. It's more just like he had a lot of basketballs in his family, grew up playing it rather than being like, you know, obsessive fan of the NBA or anything like that. But one dude I've heard him mention a few times is Mika Vukona. And Mika Vukona, obvious reasons why that would be the case for someone like Steven Adams, but also Mika Vukona, when you think about it, is kind of the definitive Breakers player. And in that case, like the Breakers have got back to something that they had lost, which Steven Adams in a way represents in the NBA. But Steven Adams also represents it because he kind of learnt it from the definitive Breakers player in Mika Vukona in a funny way. Like there's another full circle thing going on there too.
If anyone could compare with the basketballing strength of Mika Vukona and Steven Adams, it might be old D Pardon.
Yeah, well,
he's a champion. Wildcard, we got some Blackcaps cricket to discuss here. We've also got a White Ferns series against Bangladesh starting tomorrow, Friday, and we've got Ford Trophy stuff happening at the moment. So we'll try and wiggle through all of those cricketing topics. Just a quick word on the White Ferns versus Bangladesh. 3 T20s. We're obviously looking towards the T20 World Cup, and I think the White Ferns will be too good for Bangladesh generally in the whole series. And it's just going to be an interesting balance between the best players might be able to win every game for the White Ferns. Like Sophie Devine and Susie Bates probably going to open the batting and they just might score all the runs. Amelia Kerr, Sophie Devine, they might take all the wickets and score all the runs. You know, like that's a very realistic possibility. They've only played one game against Bangladesh in each format. Once at the World Cup, the recent World Cup, and they've also played one T20 against them and they've won both of them. Building towards the T20 World Cup, basically looking at the batting role players, which is essentially Lauren Down, Brooke Halliday, and Georgia Plummer. Batting, 5 and 6. So they're competing for slots in the team. And you've got a very talented unit of spin bowlers, Amelia Kerr, Eden Carson, and Fran Jonas, who can all play in the same T20 team together. So then you're looking for the best seamers around them. Because I think the White Ferns should be playing 3 spinners in their first 11. You got a leggy, you got a lefty, a regular lefty, and then you've got Eden Carson's offies. And Eden Carson's also one of the best fielders in the team in New Zealand. So those are 2 general pockets to watch out for. Have written a preview that dives into this a lot deeper. But you're looking at the batting role players and what they can offer. As far as T20 cricket, you're looking for 20 runs off 10 deliveries, 15 runs off 8, 9, 10 deliveries. Can you do that? And do you have the mana to salvage an innings if the top order fails? And also the asset of 3 spinners who can all do a job at this level.
Yeah. So what were the games that were going on? The New Zealand A thing, they had a couple games, right? That was against this touring Bangladesh team, right?
Correct.
So that effectively series warm-ups. Because that looked rather interesting, specifically from a case of like if you're picking, because selections with the White Ferns have been a weird thing for a wee while. And I did notice in those A games, Kate Ibrahim was playing and scoring a few runs. Also noticed Lee Kasparek was playing. Like a few of these players who you wondered maybe are they just like not on the scene anymore for the White Ferns, or why? What did they got to do to get picked, kind of thing? Were playing some NZA stuff, which is pretty funky. Are you? Yeah,
But there
I don't
was
know.
there was Tamsin Newton, there was Natalie Dodd,
True.
Sachi
Yep.
Shari, who has played multiple seasons of domestic cricket. Like, it's pretty obvious what was happening. Like, there's a new coach, and they have sharpened up some of the personnel. Like Sarah McGlashan has a role, greater
Yep.
role in that setup, and so on. So I I don't think any of those players should be in a T20 first 11. However, those are the players who, if someone is injured, if someone's unavailable, those are the players who you want to promote to do a job. Like, I can say T20 team, you're looking, okay, you've got these batting role players, Georgia Plummer, Lauren Down, Brooke Halliday. They all have a fair claim to their roles ahead of Kate Ibrahim. It's quite a different situation in one-day cricket, because
Yeah.
Kate Ibrahim scores all the runs in one-day cricket, but we are focusing on T20 cricket with the T20 World Cup in mind. And the thing to watch for, like when you're just watching women's cricketers, look for shots through the covers, because a lot of these players have, like, there's no statistical background to warrant their selection. Like, these batting role players in T20 international cricket and T20 cricket, so it's 2 formats each, 3 players, you got 6 different averages. Lauren Down's T20 domestic average is the only one over 15. So you can't say these players are scoring the runs to warrant White Fern's selection, but what they do is they all have like punchy strokes. They can all hit through the ball. Like Georgia Plummer has barely scored any runs in domestic cricket, but she can play over the top of the covers. And it's a style of player that I think they're trying to rock with at the moment, just with the role in T20 cricket they have to do. Because you, like, in this series, this T20 series, those 3 players, they may face a total of like 30 deliveries in 3 games. So it's quite a tricky little role. And that's just, you've got 3 of them maybe competing for 2 slots. May the best lady win. Like, who can hit 20 runs off 10 balls? Like, that's, you're just looking for someone to do that. But the second tier, you do want to have a bit of a grislier look, because they're the players who are going to step up and cover positions. And also, any young player that does get into that development system, you want older, experienced players around them to help develop them as well. Trivia question here, Wildcard. ODI cricket this year for the Blackcaps. We've got a decent sample size. Old Tommy Latham, 13 innings. We know he scored a shitload of runs. What's his strike rate?
Strike rate, I'm saying 105.
101.
Ooh. I figured he would have got it up nice around that run a ball or better with that last knock of his. So
Well, it's 13
that's
innings.
pretty handy.
Like, these aren't like
Yeah.
5 innings and 1 knock is going to take your strike rate up over 100. He's the only. What do we have? We got Tom Latham's the only. Tom Latham and Michael Bracewell are the only Blackcaps batters who have scored over 150 runs with a strike rate over 100. So again, like, I just like Tommy Latham as a batter, and he's doing the damn thing. Obviously, this wraps up the Blackcaps versus India ODI series. Blackcaps won the first game. Next 2 games were washed out, and this kind of, I think they would have won that Christchurch game. Who knows what would have happened in the second game at Hamilton? But it took a win away from the Blackcaps. They've only got 12 wins. India's still the big Donny. They've got 13 wins at the top of the Super League ladder. But it was a fairly good series from the Blackcaps wildcard. What is one observation? I'm going to try and keep you on the tracks here, just because we've got so many topics to discuss. But I do want one observation, one idea about the Blackcaps from this series, which I got a bit of a freshen up at old Hagley wildcard. There were a couple of funky wrinkles in that third ODI. But if you just one thing that's been on your mind with the Blackcaps.
Well, they would have won that third ODI because they were way ahead on DLS and were only 2 overs short of being able to constitute a completed game. So if they'd lasted 10 minutes more, just 10 minutes more of cricket, they would have had that in the bag at the point at which the rain came. A full game, you never know. We might have lost a few wickets in a flurry, but I mean, yeah, that one did throw in some curious things. Adam Milne with his second best ever bowling figures of 3 for 57, which surprised me because that's actually not very good for your second best ever bowling figures for a guy who's been playing, admittedly on and off for several years in this team. Daryl Mitchell getting 3 for 25, better than anything Adam Milne's ever done, but also Mitchell Santner not bowling till after the 40th over. Like, these little bowling wrinkles, I think, are quite interesting because it was, you've said a couple times, like, you don't love the Milne and Ferguson combination. I tend to agree. I think there's not a lot of variety there. I think they're different styles, but I think it's Milne and Henry are quite similar, and then Ferguson does his own thing. But then you over 4 bowlers when you've also got Southey in there, you just want something else. But I thought that was funky that Mitchell then also bowled 7 overs and took a few wickets because just right arm seam the whole way, right arm seam from start to finish. It did all right at Hagley Oval. The dudes bowled well, got timely wickets. If Trent Bolt's not playing much down the line, though, in ODI cricket in particular, you need a little bit more variety. It doesn't necessarily mean you got to find a left-hander from somewhere. It might just mean you need a right-hander who does something different. Carl Jamieson might be an example of someone coming back, but I do have some issues with that, particularly when you're going with a lineup where you've got what did they have, like Mitchell at 4 and Phillips at 6. You have to consider at least one of those guys a regular bowling option if that's what you're going to do, because otherwise you've only got 5 bowlers. So it was good to see Mitchell get 7 overs and a few wickets, because I think he is an underused bowler for sure. And I do think Phillips can do a job as an alternative bowler. You definitely don't want him in your top 5, but as someone who can give you a couple overs if it's like spinning a little bit or the deck's nice and slow, he's a hyperactive cricketer who can come in and do some stuff. So that's interesting, especially also because you didn't see Jimmy Neesham. I think Jimmy Neesham maybe hasn't quite done it over the last 6 months to the same extent as he has in the past, but also, and particularly with the ball, where he's like trailed off quite a bit just in the last year or two. But he has been an effective bowler for this team in the past, and I do think they're missing that. But which is why I think you just got to get more out of Daryl Mitchell with the ball. I think that's the solution, is if Mitchell's the better batter and you want him in your top 4, well, you're going to need to find a way to get more overs out of him. And I'm sure he's not going to turn that opportunity down. I'm sure he was always an all-rounder up until he made the Blackcaps test team, basically, and just batted so well, people forgot he could bowl. So I think that's quite interesting, because there is, which is coming out of this like mist of 2 T20 World Cups in a short space of time. It's an ODI World Cup next year, and they got to start figuring out these things now. They got to start figuring out what the balance of their ODI team looks like. And if Neesham's not in the first 11, the separate issue is the Allen versus Guptill thing. Allen had a pretty nice innings in this one, so I think he probably bought himself another tour. But
let's just stick with one idea and get it before we get all over the place. So the bowling, like, don't cling to this bowling attack. Like, they're going to Pakistan next. Like, it's going to be a bit different. But also,
where's the World Cup?
India.
Right. So Pakistan conditions might be more reflective then
And
of what we
also with
see.
we're like, what are you going to do at Hagley? Well,
Grab an umbrella.
it seems around. It's raining. It's cold. It's going to nip around. So you could have 11 right arm seamers, and it's all good. Like, let's be honest. Like, it's quite an isolated situation. Although, but then you compare it to Eden Park. It's a similar bowling attack, but it's a different job. And this is again the Blackcaps moving from ground to ground. Eden Park, there's a bit of seam, bit of nibble, but also you're trying to hit the chest. You're trying to hit the logo on the shirt. You're trying to tuck the batsman up so they can't drive you down the ground for six. Well, those bowlers then just try to pitch the ball up at Hagley because it's going to nip around. You're going to catch the edge. You're going to do some things against those Indian batters. Case in point, Suryakumar Yadav, like fantastic batter, but they've got him out nicking twice.
Yep.
And I think it can get a bit overthought sometimes, myself included, where it's still New Zealand, it's still swing seam central. Like there is spin, and we've talked about that, but like Matt Henry's going to nibble the ball around. Southey's got it swinging. Lockie Ferguson's doing his old like induckers to the right hander. Also bowled a cross seam delivery that seemed a bit to swing against the lefty. Got him plumb LBW. That was a weird one. Henry was bowling faster than Milne for patches, which was interesting. But it's like, I think they're just giving Milne a crap. They just want to give him an extended run. But again, they just inject players for that scenario. So they're going to go to Pakistan and they're going to inject players for that scenario, and they're going to find the best players to put in their pool of players. And the thing about Daryl Mitchell is stay ready. The thing about Glenn Phillips bowling is stay ready. Jimmy Neesham, stay ready bowling. Like there's those lads who Michael Bracewell might get into a team, but he might not bowl, and then he might not bowl one game, and then the next game he's going to have to bowl. And that's what I got from the Daryl Mitchell success at Hagley, is he was ready for that moment. And he doesn't really bowl much in the white ball cricket of late, but he was ready for that moment and he enjoyed success. And it's kind of like, when it's your time, it's going to be your time. We can't really predict it though. You can plan as much as you want, but you also can't plan for, like mid-game, yeah, we got Mitchell, it's nipping around a bit, yeah, we'll give that a crack. And he's going to come in and bowl Craig McMillan short deliveries, and he's also going to, get a lot of forward defensive strokes as well.
Which is a useful option as long as they're open to it. And I think this game probably helps that case. The other takeaway I had from specifically the third game was just like, and it also applies to staying ready and waiting for your moment and then taking the moment when it comes along. Katie Martin during a rain delay was fantastic television. Running around like doing interviews and fumbling with the umbrella, and whenever they put Katie Martin in next to Craig McMillan, it's gold TV because she just winds him up and he just tries to play with a straight bat every time. It's so funny. That duo is the new Bill Laurie and Tony Craig of Spark Sport.
Just watch out for the Craig McMillan straight up in the air commentary.
Oh my god!
It has
straight up,
or it's the opposite. Oh, he's hit that a long way, straight to the fielder.
Drops for a catch and so off or something. Yeah.
It is. You got to trust your own eyes. If the ball's gone straight up, it's gone straight up. If the ball's gone flying and he says it's gone straight up, it's probably gone for six. So do your own mahi there. You did mention the batting wildcard, and you did mention Fenelon. I would like to say the reason I and we get lost in the sauce is that the sauce is really good. It's full of sugar. It's full of just flavors, and it's tasty. It's beautiful. So you get lost in the sauce around Tom Latham and Kane Williamson because Finn Allen's really fun to watch. Devon Conway is awesome. You know, you get a bit of Glenn Phillips, you get a bit of Daryl Mitchell, whoever else it is. You get lost in the sauce because the sauce is really yummy. And that's what I was thinking when I was watching Conway and Allen bat last night. Conway, obviously, he's just middling drives and he's got that flourish. It's beautiful. Finn Allen, that opening slot is his to lose. Like, he's going to have to do something bad to be dropped for Guptill again. I don't know if he's going to do something bad. Yesterday, there were some moments. So again, you're bowling at Hagley. The Indian seam attack is moving the ball around. Nibble, swing, seam. And they did make it sound like Finn Allen was really circumspect in the commentary at the start of the innings. Like, he played a test innings. He really saw off the new ball. He also had a couple edges fly over slip. Like, edges were flying everywhere because he's swinging his bat at deliveries that are swinging and seaming. So I did feel like it's still Finn Allen, right? Like, yes, he might leave a few deliveries. Yes, he might play a few forward defensive strokes, but he's also swinging hard at loose deliveries or anything that gives him a bit of space to swing hard. That's what he does. That's the slugging in him. And you think of baseball slugging, which is where this term comes from. The cricket equivalent is the six he hit down the ground off the back foot. Like, that is Finn Allen slugging. There's not many Blackcaps batters or batters around the world who can play that shot. Like, that is a Finn Allen slugging shot. A bit classier than slugging may sound, but that's the joy of Finn Allen. But I am seeing development in his work. Like, I think he's a really good batter in this team, to the extent where I think he's not going to do anything to warrant being dropped in the immediate future over the next 12 months into the World Cup. His only issue will be if he does get too frisky and a bit too aggressive and it doesn't come off 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, then people are going to start asking questions, because Guptill will be hot on his heels. Guptill just got out in the Ford
I just saw that.
against
Jacob Duffy got him.
We'll just have a quick gaze at this while we are recording. Jacob Duffy, short delivery, missed time. So obviously Guppy's he's in his head. He's out of the Blackcaps.
He's just trying to smash him there, isn't he? That's all.
So yeah, like, I think it's just good Blackcaps ODI series. Let's be honest. Like, after the softness of the Australian League, things will get tricky, and when they do go to Pakistan, which is in January. So it's basically all domestic cricket till then. The White Ferns finish their series against Bangladesh and go straight into Super Smash, which leads into the T20 World Cup. It's basically Ford Trophy now for the men. That will go into Super Smash, and I think their next Blackcaps cricket is an away tour to Pakistan in January. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, first test starts on this 27th of December. Second test starts on 4th of Jan. And then 11th, 13th, 15th is the 3-game ODI series. So, yeah, that sounds correct. And then England come here later in February, mid-February, for 1 test, 2 tests, seemingly only 2 tests. And Sri Lanka have 2 tests and 3 ODIs and 3 T20s. And then we seem to go back to Pakistan in April for 3, 4, 5 T20s and 5 ODIs. Some of that, I'm not sure which one, but I think probably that second Pakistan tour is the Hurt Feelings Memorial Series for pulling out of the last one. Sorry, fellas, we'll give you another tour later on. I think that's what that is. I'm not sure which one, because I doubt they're both going to apply for Super League points. I suspect probably the December-January tour is the Super League points, but I'd have to check that out because it doesn't say on the
It's
Blackcaps app.
the Super League draw is the January series.
Right, there we go. So the one in April, May, it's kind of a freebie.
I think the best way to follow Blackcaps cricket is pick your spots. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to care all that much about like a 10 game limited overs series that means nothing. Like, and then folks like around the world, obviously cricket is always in crisis. Like they're looking at these crowd numbers around like various things. It's like, yeah, you're playing too much cricket, bro. Like just chill out and get a bit of scarcity in your schedule, and people might want to get engaged a bit more, which is the recipe for success in New Zealand. Like we love scarcity apparently, so it's working out well. For Trophy Wildcard, do you have any just things on the top of your head from the recent games that you'd like to pick my brains about, or just anything to spark a corridor about the Ford Trophy? It was a weird crop of games yesterday. Wellington rolled a very impressive Central Districts batting lineup with Ollie Newton taking 6 wickets. Northern Districts defeated Canterbury, but it was a heavily rain-affected game. They won by Duckworth, Lewis, and Steve. That's not the right one, eh? S. Smith, Steve, Sean.
DLS. Oh, the other one, Stern.
Yeah, who cares? Steve.
Duckworth, Lewis, Stern.
I just prefer Duckworth.
Yeah, I was wondering where you're going with that. Was it Steve Smith?
Yeah, no, Duckworth, Lewis, and Steve. So Northern Districts won that game by Duckworth, Lewis, and Steve. Against Canterbury, that was Ish Sodhi's first game for Canterbury. Scored a few runs.
Highest list day score, I believe. Yeah, I was looking at that because I thought he was going to get a 50.
Northern Districts had Kieran Clark taking a lot of wickets, and I do like the work of Kartanik Clark up the order for Northern Districts. He smacked some runs for them. 46 runs at a strike rate of 127. Probably the most undercover cricketer you need to know about in New Zealand. Just how he's a bit Fennell-ish, and just how effortlessly he blasts shots at the top of the order for Northern Districts. Of course, we do like to mention Kartanik Clark. He is the reason Trent Boult hit that winning 6 at Bay Oval. Kartanik Clark, talked about this a lot, got pegged in the hip by Ed Nuttall and couldn't run. So all he did is just started smacking sixes. It was ridiculous. Probably one of my favorite Super Smash moments ever. And he couldn't run, so he had to leave the field. And then Northern Districts lose a few wickets. Game eventuates. He comes back out. He's batting alongside Trent Boult. Boult hits the 6. Fantastic moment. Ford Trophy Wildcard, anything you want to throw up?
Not massively, because it just seems like rain has been an annoying presence in a lot of these things. I mean, Ollie Newton taken, what did you say? He got 6 for A. Where are we? 6 for 33 yeah. For Wellington, in which he dismissed Schmullian, Cleaver, Young, Taylor, and Clarkson, and Ajaz Patel. And all except Cleaver, I think, they got ducks. Is pretty remarkable. That's one of your individual performances of the season already, especially when you consider the caliber of the batting lineup that he tore through and getting most of them without scoring. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I watched a little bit of Ish Sodhi and Chad Bowes going around trying to resurrect an innings for Canterbury on the live stream there until rain came along and I stopped watching. But it's I don't know. How many has everyone played like sort of 2 or 3 times yet, or are we still waiting to get up to that point? It seems like we're still in the getting the hang of things stage. Where are we? Northern's played 1, Otago's played 1, Auckland this is Auckland's first game. The other 3 have played 2 games. So, and all the 3 who have played 2 games have won 1, lost 1. Yeah, it feels a little bit of the very early season things. Is there like specific things because I asked you about on the variety show about a few players to pick out. Are there like specific trends as well, like overall trends you're expecting to see or keeping an eye out to see if they happen for the Ford Trophy?
We do get asked a lot about the young players, and because we've got this
Mm-hmm.
large middle class, it kind of there is a there is more talent in that middle class than there is young players trying to crack into like young phenom type of cricketers. But I just mentioned Carter Clark. Kieran Clark was due to took 4 wickets for Northern Districts. He's been playing Plunkett Shield. He is a very good all-rounder for Northern Districts. So you got 2 young cricketers there for Northern, Carter Clark and Kieran Clark to watch out for. Canterbury, Leo Carter is just someone who has been a very destructive super smash batter, and he's just a classy little unit in that Canterbury batting lineup. So is he another younger cricketer alongside Henry Shipley? Like, big fans of Henry Shipley at the niche cage. So he is a fantastic all-rounder himself. Wellington's young group, they seem to be battling this season. They're not doing too well in Plunkett Shield. Their batting lineup does look a bit fragile, and it's Newton who took the wickets. Michael Snedden has been great in the Plunkett Shield. He's also taken some wickets here in the Ford Trophy. And we've mentioned Tom Blundell as the MVP, because he's the MVP because he's the dude doing everything for Wellington batting wise. So that does lead me to be curious about Rachin Ravindra, who could, like, he is a type of cricketer who you can see contributing to the Blackcaps for a long time, especially working in these roles and these multi-faceted cricketers that you want to have in the international arena. He's someone who I think Kiwi cricket fans should be eager to see step up, especially in the white ball stuff this season, because he's going to play a big role. Like, as I said, there's not many Wellington batters scoring a lot of runs right now. It's mainly Tom Blundell. Rachin Ravindra's second fiddle, but he's not as dominant as Blundell. So, and he's going to bowl as well. He's going to bowl his spin. So he's someone else. And I've mentioned Dean Foxcroft, another young cricketer. His best format is list day cricket, one-day cricket. I think he's averaging around 50 in that format, so just watch out for him. And of course, Auckland's first game is happening right now. They have selected Aditya Ashok in their team. So that follows their pattern from last season, where he played Ford Trophy and Super Smash but didn't play Plunkett Shield. Now he's playing their first Ford Trophy game against Otago. And I do see Otago have selected Ben Lockrose, who is a very talented young cricketer. He's a spinning all-rounder, and he is playing alongside Michael Rippon in that Otago team. Auckland, as I just mentioned, they've got 2 spinners, Ashok and Somerville. So that trend continues of 2-pronged spin attacks.
Yeah, I saw a little bit about Ben Lockrose. There's an article about him on Otago Daily Times, where I was there trying to search up some stuff on how I wanted to see what the Southern United reaction was to losing to Central in the Women's National League football, and it was there, but I couldn't read it because ODT have now got subscription things going on, and you got to pay $5 a month or whatever, which I would do if I had $5 to spare per month. But Otago Daily Times aren't spending $5 on our Patreon a month, in which case it would balance out and I would be happy. But until we boost our Patreons, I can't be wasting money on the other subscribers. So unfortunately, I couldn't read that article, but I did notice Lockrose's name pop up there. So they mentioned he'd taken like 2 7-fers in club cricket in the last month or something like that. So apparently he's a decent up and comer.
National League football wildcard. Before we get into the men's final, what are some couple of key ideas for the women's National League at the moment? Just to keep in mind, it is kind of second fiddle just at the moment behind this men's final, and we will obviously get into a National League women's final in the coming weeks. But what's 1 or 2 things about the women's competition that is front of mind this week?
Yeah, second fiddle in a band with 2 fiddles. So The first 1A, 1B kind of situation, I'll say. Because last week in the women's comp was absolutely unreal. Like we had two massive upsets. Capital getting the points over Western Springs, who I think Western Springs, they've failed a couple of times with a chance to really like clinch that second grand final spot. And they're faltering at a time that's not ideal for them because there's only 2 weeks left of the regular season until the grand final. They're still likely to be the team that makes it, but they're scoring a lot of goals and winning. I think they won their first 6 games in a row. Since then, a lot of draws, a bit too leaky at the back, surprisingly, like not quite scoring the amount of goals they were at the beginning. And that cost them against Capital in a really, 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 really windy day on an artificial turf, which we get more bounce and more spin, and therefore the wind is even more affecting of the game, and just they were playing into the breeze in the second half and they got stuck by it and lost 3-2, having been 2-1 up. So Western Springs, big upset there, got to sort of steady the ship a little bit over the next couple rounds. But I think that also plays into the main idea I've had over the last couple rounds, which is that like these Auckland teams had a massive advantage coming into the start of the season, and that there were club teams who'd been playing the whole year. Like not all of that is played into the National League, because the advantage of playing for the whole season is that you build up these combinations. Everyone knows how to play with each other. They're familiar. They've got like the coaching patterns have been completely instilled, all these things. But a team like Auckland United, for example, has lost a lot of players since the winter season. Therefore, you lose that advantage. Like you don't have that. If you're trying to bring in new players, you're basically just on the same situation as where the Fed teams were. But the rise of the Federation teams in the last couple of rounds has been undeniable. Like you've seen Southern United go on a big undefeated streak, win about 6 games undefeated, and they've been just after 2 really terrible games. I think they conceded 13 goals in their first 2 games. I don't think they conceded 13 in their next, I don't think they've conceded another 13 goals since, I would say, in the 10 games that have followed, but I'd have to check that. They might have now. But I mean, they figured things out after a slow start, and they were the quick ones. Canterbury United Pride took about 5 or 6 rounds to get going, and since then they've won 4 of their last 5, and the one game they lost was a 3-2 loss to Western Springs, in which they conceded a 90th minute winner, which might have been offside, but hard to tell from the camera angle because it was a runaway goal. So they've been really good for over a month. At the start of the season, they lost their chance of competing for the final because they dropped too many points. They've been really good since. And you're in the core of their team, Rebecca Lake, Lara Wall, Whitney Hepburn, Una Foyle, like these players who have been around there for multiple championships with this team. You're seeing them get back to their old standards now that they had a few months to get up to speed, like to build together as a team. Just that disadvantage that the Federation teams had over the first month of the season compared to where they are now. I don't think it's a coincidence you're seeing a lot of good results from those teams now, include most notably Canterbury United, who've really come good. And one of the main things that's helped them come good has been the youth league season ended, and they took their top scorer from their championship youth league team, Charlotte Roche, who I thought she was younger, but they said she was 18 on the broadcast this week, so she must be 18. They'd know better than I. She has scored, I think, 7 goals in 4 starts, and has given that team a presence going forward, like an anchor to build around in their attacks, a focal point, so to say. That's made a big difference for them as well. And then most notably, like Central Football had a win on the weekend. Central Football, the team from like sort of Hawke's Bay, Taranaki regions. They play in Palmerston North. They've got a split of players from around Palmy Base, from around Napier Base. Those 2 places aren't exactly like right next to each other. There's a bit of travel involved there. Even during this, it's like hard enough to get a squad together to start with, when you've got like maximum 2 weeks of preseason to then play against Auckland teams who've been playing for months together. That's hard enough. Then you've also got the fact that the best players in the central region go to other regions. They go move to Wellington, they move to Auckland in order to play at a higher standard. So you lose your best players once they turn like university age. They've got a squad of largely 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and 1 or 2 sprinkled in that are a bit older, but also a few that are younger than that as well. They've had a 15-year-old starting their last couple of games, Lily Dowsing. So you can see the disadvantage that they're at. Needless to say, they lost their first 10 games. 4 different occasions they conceded at least 8 goals. They'd had a couple close calls. They were really close to beating Canterbury. They probably shouldn't have beaten Southern on the weekend. They got absolutely pasted in terms of shot totals and everything, but they defended really well, backs to the wall, restricted Southern to just 1 goal, scored 2 outrageously good goals. Bit of luck involved when that's the case, but still, themselves to win 2-1. And they finally got their first win of the season. That was a massive upset as well against the Southern team that I mentioned. Lost a couple of players, but have been in good form. So just that the rise of the federation teams over the last sort of month, once they've had time to get the ball rolling and get things going, build those combinations and those partnerships on the field and coaches' ideas being implemented and whatnot, it does show a massive fault with the way the competition is organized, in that the Auckland teams just have this huge advantage. But you are now seeing the difference. At the start of the thing, it was just like these Auckland teams are thrashing the Feds whenever they play. Now you're actually seeing the Feds putting up a big, strong bit of retaliation against some of these Auckland sides who are faltering a little bit, probably a bit tired from a very long season. So just interesting how that season has panned along in those 2 ways, because yeah, Canterbury United in particular have been really good for the last month.
Men's final wildcard, who are the teams involved?
You've got the 2 obvious ones, basically, Auckland City and Wellington Olympic, champions of the Northern League, champions of the Central League.
Who is going to be the best player? Like, who is the best player involved in this final?
Ooh, I think if I was to pick one from each team, I think it's the obvious one. I think you're going Cameron Howison from Auckland City, who is a regular, semi-regular, always international, but has added a few caps out of despite playing domestically, which not too many others have. Just classy midfielder whose vision for a pass is better than pretty much anyone. Scored an amazing goal from over halfway not so long ago. And Jack Henry Sinclair for Wellington Olympic, who's just absolute dynamic right wing back, but is quick and direct enough, and his team is good enough that right wing back basically means right winger, and he's got a bunch of goals, bunch of assists, great combinations with the dudes around him. He's a fantastic player too. So I think you've got 2. I think most people, if you surveyed the country, most people would probably say those are the 2 highest performing like New Zealand locally based domestic players, and they're going head to head in the final. That's what you want to see.
Who is the best emerging young player involved in this final?
There are a couple of interesting dudes for Auckland City. Probably most notable, Joe Lee, who's 20-year-old Korean Kiwi winger, plays on the right wing, but very left-footed. So a lot of cutting in and crossing and diagonal and shots and diagonal through balls, things like that. He's probably the best bet for an Auckland City guy, although Liam Gillian's had a good couple games in a row as well, playing in a similar spot. Would probably go with Jesse Randall for Wellington Olympic, although Wellington Olympic have a couple, like Theo Edema as well, defensive midfielder / centre-back, really tall, good, tidy player, scored a nice goal last week, also scored an own goal, but they didn't credit it to him, so lucky break there. But I'd go with Jesse Randall, who is also in fantastic form. Wellington Olympic basically have like a front 5. So you got Jonty Rubos, the left wing back, who's an ex-Phoenix Academy player. Jack Henry Sinclair's an ex-Phoenix Academy player as well, actually, but a couple years older. On the right, you got Gianni Bazoukas as the main man up front. Golden Boot, tied with Garvin Coughlin with 9 goals over the regular season. And then you got Caelan Gould and Jesse Randall playing off of those 2. Gould's an Englishman. Randall's an up-and-coming Kiwi dude, I'd say he's about 20, 21. Did a little bit of the university thing over in the States. Doesn't seem like he's gone back there, but lightning quick. He's been a really good goal scorer because he's played a few times. He's played a couple National League campaigns before. He's been a great goal scorer. Didn't see a lot of that at the start of the season where he was just the assist king. All of a sudden scores 4 against Christchurch United a couple of weeks ago. And I think now he's the only player with like 6 goals plus at least 6 assists in the league. I think that's the case. I haven't got my notes open, but Yeah, Jesse Randall, real quick, and the way that Wellington Olympic players will unlock, there's so much speed, and they can play really direct. They hit you in the counter attack, but also they scored a goal on the weekend, which was like, I think Miramar Rangers kicked off, went long, Justin Gully controls it. 25 passes later, every single outfielder has touched the ball, and Jesse Randall set it up for Gianni Bazookas to score inside like 120 seconds gone of the game. I think it might have even been 80 seconds, something like that. Unreal goal. You see the team that can build up in slow possession and create a goal that way, or they can hit you directly on the counter attack, playing at pace and just slicing you to pieces. That's really exciting to watch. Auckland City can do the possession stuff, a little less direct, so they are a bit more death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. But they have classy finishes. They still got Emiliano Tade, Ryan De Vries, super experienced players at this level. They know how to win these finals, more experience in the big games there. Probably a better defense as well. I think Adam Mitchell, Sam Brotherton is as good as it gets as a central defensive combination. Although Wellington Olympic, I think, have actually conceded a fewer goals over the season, but they do leave themselves slightly open by being more direct. But yeah, that's basically for a grand final, you couldn't really ask for anything better because you've got the two best teams. You've got a really interesting stylistic matchup because Auckland City beat them in the first round of the season, but it was a very close game in which Olympic had a controversial disallowed goal. This was after City knocked them out in the Chatham Cup semi-final, in which case City were way better that day. But Olympic much improved the second time they faced them. If they're much improved the third time they face them this year, well, they'll probably win because there's not that much more distance to cover. So fascinating game, that one at Mount Smart Stadium. So
you kind of went off on a tangent to answer the whole preview, but who was the best young player?
Well, Jesse Randall. I was what I
Jesse Randall. So
around to.
Not about Lee. You mentioned a lot of names, so I'm just curious.
Yeah,
like, who's the
Lee
big
would be
Donny
the pick
young
for
player?
Auckland City, but I'm going Jesse Randall overall. Although we'll see if Theo Edema starts because he's one to keep an eye out too as a backup if he gets the start for Olympic, which he might be more likely off the bench, I suspect.
Rightio. So then we've also got Wellington Phoenix. The men are back in the A-League. The women continue to march along. The women are playing against Melbourne Victory. Melbourne Victory are the only other team who have lost 2 games. So that could be a good thing for the Wellington Phoenix women. And the Wellington Phoenix men, they are bouncing back with a game against the Western Sydney Wanderers, who I think are second on the ladder wildcard. We're just... chance of a positive result for the woman.
Maybe. It was the first away game. Victory haven't been that flash, surprisingly, though. I thought they would be a lot better than they have been. I'm not sure who they've lost to. I'll just check that quickly. But round 1, they lost to Sydney. No, they didn't. Round 1, they lost to Western United, and round 2, they lost to Sydney. So I think that also might be 2 very good teams they've lost to. So I think that might be misleading, that Victory. They've only lost 1-0 and 2-0, but that does mean they haven't scored a goal. So maybe that's something that will help the Phoenix, is that if they can keep it level for quite a while, that will be something to build off of. I wouldn't have too many expectations of them getting a victory, but they're the kind of team that I think they've got a few more goals in them this year than they did last year. And if they can defensively cut out some of the errors we've seen over the first 2 weeks and just hang tough with the team, you never know what can happen. It would be the same blueprint as like Central beating Southern in the Women's League on the weekend. You just stick close enough and you might get lucky, you know? That can happen. Claudia Bunge as well plays for Melbourne Victory, so...
2 losses. Who has been a really positive sign for the Phoenix woman? Best player, most encouraging player so far?
I mean, the best player is Betsy Hassett, and it's probably not even close. I thought she was really good in the first game, wasn't so good in the second game, so hoping for a little bit of a bounce back there. I think that game against Western United bypassed the midfield a lot, them playing quite direct, and the Phoenix also having to be relatively direct. That probably was a factor in that. I think Michaela Robertson as well, her she didn't play the first game, but she played the second game, got about an hour. It was still 1-1 when she went off. And I think they lost a lot of they lost a lot of poise when they didn't have her as someone to build their attacks through anymore, and got put under a fair bit of pressure as a result because they couldn't keep the ball as high up in the field as they were. I think you look at the attackers that they have, and there are a lot of like really talented players. Most of them aren't at the point where you're like, this is the final product of this person. Like they're all got a lot of like skills to be added. They're developing players. A lot of them still plenty of potential. But if you look at just where they are right now, I'd say Michaela Robertson is the most complete forward that they have. She's the only person who I would say has a completely reliable technique, has pace in behind, has the vision to pick a pass, to switch the play, to thread a ball in behind, and also the finishing to score goals. A lot of players who tick a lot of those boxes. Some of them tick most of those boxes. I don't think there's anyone who ticks all of those boxes except for Michaela Robertson. So if she's building up her minutes capacity, that's a good thing, and that will help the Phoenix immensely. Having someone who she's a rookie at the professional level, but she's about 25 or 26 and played a lot of games like National League and around that level for a long time. Was with the Olympic squad as well. Didn't play, but was part of the extended Olympic squad that traveled. So she's got more experience than most players do in this situation. First professional season it's different for her than it is for a lot of the youngsters.
Wellington Phoenix men, they're playing the second best team in the A-League so far, and they're obviously returning after a wee break. Is this a difficult matchup to return to the A-League season with, or is it kind of like an opportunity to pounce on a really good team? How are you viewing this first game after a couple of weeks off for the Wellington Phoenix against Western Sydney Wanderers in Wellington, Saturday night, home game?
Next Saturday, I believe.
Oh, Saturday.
Or is it? No, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
It is too. Another week off.
Yeah, but still, this is the long running. I don't know. I watched all the National League games, but the last game of the reserves season, you saw Sam Sutton starting at left back. You saw Alex Rufer starting in centre midfield. There was his return from a long injury layoff, got 31 minutes, and then they subbed him off as a pre-planned thing, like no longer than that, particularly because they're playing on an artificial surface and he's coming back from a knee injury. So safety first, but he looked tidy. Sam Sutton was absolutely brilliant, made the team of the week, as did Jan Saas. You don't often see an import player playing in the reserve team, but he did there, and he goal assist, hit the post twice, just without seeming to get out of second gear. He just bossed the show, which is what you want. That's what should be the case for a Brazilian import. And that was his first goal for the club that he scored there, and hopefully that gets him a bit of a kickstart after what's been a very frustrating first 6 weeks for him. He was an unused sub in one game, and he obviously got the red card on debut, spent some time suspended. Bit of confidence there, hopefully, for him. Tele was there on the sideline watching
the
too.
Phoenix players don't go play for Wellington Olympic.
No. Well, they got a reserve team playing in the same National League, so, you know. But Phoenix players actually do go play for Wellington Olympic after they get released by the Phoenix. It's quite common. Quite a few ex-Phoenix players in that Olympic team, same as there are in Miramar Rangers, same as there are sprinkled around the rest of the league as well. There's a few. So it goes. Like, I mean, there was one bummer in that game, though, which is that Finn Sermon did a shoulder injury, and it looked like it might have been a dislocation. So hopefully that's not a Louis Fenton 2.0 type situation. Hopefully it's not as bad as it looked, but I haven't heard anything yet. But it sounds like he might be, if it's what it looked like, he might be out for a little wee while.
So who are the players who have played reserve grade?
Those dudes I mentioned all played in that game. I've got to do this off memory. So Sam Sutton played that game, Jan Saas, Alex Rufer, that was their first game each. Oscar Van Hadden played that game and the one before that, so he's played a couple. He scored in that most recent game. Actually, all four of their goals were scored by pros. Van Hadden got one, Sutton got one, Saas got one. Can't remember if they scored a fourth or whatever. But Van Hatten might have actually got two. Come to think of it. Who else was there? You got guys like Riley Bidwa and Noah Karunaratne who were and Jackson Manuel, I think, as well, played a little bit at the start of the season, who are reserves players but have played for the senior team. Lucas Moregas, the Aussie left back, who started the first two games while Sam Sutton was still injured. He played about 5 games in a row. Finn Sermon's played 3 or 4. Alex Paulson's played about 3, a goalkeeper, reserve goalie. Ben Old played 1 game. I think that's it. I think that's all. So there are quite a few, actually quite a few of them have popped up over the course of the sort of 9-game season and gotten at least 1 or 2 games of just extra match fitness, which is what you're talking about here. It's the guys who hadn't played much for the main team, Sass and with the exception of Sutton. I don't know why Sutton played, but maybe he just wanted to. He's the captain of the Phoenix, so there you go. But Sermon, Paulson, guys who've been sitting on the bench a lot. Nico Pennington played 1 game as well and was brilliant for them in that game.
Did Sass look faster than everyone? Did he look like more zip or controlled, or did he stand out from the domestic troopers?
Yeah, he definitely did. I wouldn't say necessarily faster, but he looked a step ahead and his touch was better. And he just looked like he could get to a shot. If you get them with the ball in dangerous area, he could get to a shot better than anyone would be able to prevent him. And that's why he scored 1 goal and he hit the post twice, and he could have scored other goals, and he probably should have had about 3 assists. He ended up with 1 assist still. It was a dominant performance without him really looking like he was going hundies or having to play to his max capacity. That's a pretty good sign, because it wasn't like he was there to phone it in either. You don't score a goal, get an assist, hit the post a couple of times if you just phone it in, which would have been dangerous, because if he'd done that with his coach watching on the sideline, he might not be playing too much ever again. Pennington, I thought, set a really nice standard when he played, because he played like it was a cup final. He played his most important game, and it wasn't. It was just a reserve game, trying to show that you can keep your standards up no matter where you're playing. A coach is going to take notice of that and be impressed. So I think a positive outcome for Jan Sass in that game. Whether that leads into more games for the senior team, hopefully it does. But yeah, it does feel like he's one guy who has untapped potential heading into the rest of the season. They haven't even got anything out of him yet. Well, there's a whole import player with a very good left foot who could change things for them.
A little bit of a false alarm there with the Wellington Phoenix men.
But good chat with the reserves, though.
Yeah, they're good reserve grade Wellington Phoenix chat. We will back early next week with another Patreon podcast, another variety show, newsletter coming out tomorrow via Substack. Stay tuned. Pick up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, cha-cha.